Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Maximum warp. Punch it. Punch it.
Punch it, Bishop!
Punch it.
Punch that shit!
Let's punch it.
Hello, everybody at home, and welcome. This is Punch It, Writing in Star Trek. I am your co-host, Tristan Riddell, and with me, as always, is
Charlene Schmidt.
Charlene Schmidt. We have a great episode for our listeners today about mediocrity, but it will not be a mediocre episode about great things. So, what's interesting is that you can do fantastic lists, and many have over the years, of great Star Trek episodes and even horrible Star Trek episodes. I mean, there's tons of lists of like the worst episodes of all time. I mean, it always has Code of Honor on there, Threshold, Spock's brain, things like that. But what we're going to do is we're not necessarily going to make a list, but we're going to be talking about the mediocre episodes of Star Trek. Like what makes it mediocre and how we like them or we don't like them, or we're just kind of like, okay, that happened. We'll see what goes on next week on the boob tube. So, but before we get into that, you have a few things you need to address on the mic before we move forward.
Correct. We need to actually go back to last week where we were talking about our Trek fantasies and playing with our imaginations and how Star Trek kind of intersected with that. And we had a call out for listeners to share their own stories as far as their Trek fantasies went. And we got a couple, so I would like to read them on the air. So the first one comes from Jonathan Douglas. Says, "Hey guys, love the latest show. What's your fantasy so much? I remember as a kid drawing over 13 seasons of Star Trek Voyager episodes. Wow. And 7 seasons of Star Trek Enterprise with Picard and the Enterprise E. That's a really cool idea. Side note. Most episodes were copies of the show, except I brought Voyager home in season 5. My friend and I used to play battle stations in my room and make bridge consoles out of cardboard. It was so much fun. Lastly, I too pretend to fall asleep and pretend to awake on Voyager. Thanks so much, guys. LLAP. That is so cool. For one, cardboard consoles.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think a lot of us did that. If we were at that right age where we made our own props. Oh, heck yeah. Cardboard props are the best. And then also, you're not alone in that, you talked about falling asleep and you were on Voyager. Well, that seems to be a common theme among our listeners. Because the other email I want to read comes from Richard Hunston, who's a loyal listener and writes in often. And he kind of says the same thing. He says, my fantasy was scarily like Tristan's in that I woke up on a ship. Sometimes it was the Enterprise D, later it was Voyager, and the crew knew me as one of their officers. But I had to tell them that I was not who they thought I was. I was an alternate Rick from a universe where Voyager was a work of fiction. I would put myself into life on Voyager, and as I lived there, I would recognize events starting to conform to an episode. At that point, I would go to Captain Janeway's ready room and explain that in my universe, I knew what was going to happen. I would, for the most part, let things unfold and not interfere, as this usually meant that they would get out of whatever trouble they were in. Occasionally, Janeway would make a decision that would differ from the episode narrative, and I would have to have a quiet word and tell her that if she strayed from the script, I would no longer be able to advise her on her outcome. That is hilarious.
She strayed from the script. I love that, yeah.
Yeah. I think it may be a common aspect of fantasy not to imagine ourselves as a captain or replacing a character because we want to live alongside them. Also, many of my falling asleep fantasies did not feature phaser fire action, but the run-of-the-mill day-to-day of ship life, as this felt restful. Later in life, as I begun to suffer from tinnitus and it bothers me at night, I took to having ambient noise on in the background as I slept. I tried to have a few ones, but by far my favorite was an 8-hour-long ambient track on the sound of Voyager crew quarters, the low hum of the engines, occasional computer beeps, sound of shuttlecraft passing by, etc. I close my eyes and the worries of life melt away as I imagine my room is a crew quarters on Voyager. As you said on the show, I too believe that an active fantasy life is healthy as long as it does not take over from reality. I have my head in the clouds, but my feet still on the ground. That's the perfect way to sum that up. That's what we were trying to articulate last week.
Absolutely.
Well done, Rick.
And it's I think that's the thing that really, when I read that email, I was intrigued by the mundane, the run of the mill, that a lot of us do imagine just being in Starfleet, not being in a battle or being in a phaser fight or, like having macrocosm bacteria, try to eat us. It's, like running pads from the XO to the captain, or, like going down to the mess hall or going to a birthday party or talking with our crewmates at our stations. It's things like that. Like, that's the thing, is that as Star Trek fans, we want to experience the everyday life of that. Like, shooting a phaser is fun, but the beauty of Star Trek for us is just the world and existing in that. And so it's really interesting to hear that listener articulate that. And also, speaking of tinnitus, I know that I'm sure that you, Rick, are aware of this because you have tinnitus. But just in case you're not, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy both suffered and are suffering from tinnitus. And so you are not alone in the Star Trek universe with having this condition. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. I think Rick really nailed the reason why we want to do the mundane tasks in the Star Trek world, is that it's relaxing. It's not a challenge. We're not under stress. We're not under the pressure of a firefight. It's just, no, we want to be involved in the world. We want to be immersed without having all of that extra stuff added. We don't need the action scenes. We just want to relax. And I know that 8-hour loop that you're talking about so very well.
Oh yeah, a lot of us have downloaded that or made that or put it, like, I even put that onto a CD for my parents because they requested me to do that so that they could put it in their alarm clock and set it on a timer.
Yeah, well, it is really relaxing. It's perfect for background noise when you just need some ambiance and you don't have to pay attention to it. It's just there, but it does something to your brain it eases things up. It can help you focus if you're doing work. It's good stuff.
All right. I think we should probably go ahead and go into our topic about the mediocre. It's hard to go head first into mediocrity, but that's what we're going to be doing today on this episode.
Yeah, I don't really necessarily like the word mediocrity or mediocre just because of just how many negative connotations that can bring. I like to just say, just okay. It's just okay. Yeah, because no writer, when they're starting to write a script and whatnot, nobody sets out to make an episode that's just okay. They're not they're not setting out to make a horrible episode either, although it happens. And then a lot of times when things fall in the middle, it's just like, yeah, okay. But, the thing is, with mediocre episodes, there's a lot of things that can go wrong or not quite right that make it a mediocre. Okay, you know what? I give up on saying the word.
We're just going to say just okay.
Just okay. There's a lot of things that make an episode just okay. We'll explore those things. Another aspect of this kind of part of the bell curve, if you will, because a lot of episodes are just okay, right? Some of them have kind of like a cult-like following amongst segments of the audience where, like, this is way better and underrated than people think it is. So I'd like to talk about that too. But first, let's talk about what makes an episode mediocre. Why doesn't it stand out?
I think there's certain times, like when you suggested this topic, the first thing that popped in my head was, I think a lot of times when you have a mediocre episode, it's usually because when you're like, because, one person's just okay episode could be another person's great episode, as you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. I think that could be because, like with a lot of Star Trek, there's one character it focuses on.
Uh-huh.
Sure, there's a B plot, or sometimes it can focus on multiple people. But oftentimes you can say like, oh, okay, it's like when watching Friends, you're like, oh God, this is a Joey episode. Jeez, let's just move on. Things like that. But with Star Trek, it could land on a character that you don't really dig on. Like, so even if it's potentially a great episode or well written, you could go, oh God, it's a Bashir episode. I don't like him this season, or Neelix, not again.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like that can really hit home. And I think one thing that really is interesting to me is there's this one segment, I don't think this is a perfect encapsulation. This is just one example of something that happens often, is that you have great episodes sandwich just okay episodes, and it kind of brings it down in your brain a little bit more, where it goes, maybe it could have been a good episode if it was surrounded by bad episodes, but because it's surrounded by great ones, you're like, okay, that was just okay. That was mediocre. That's fine. Let's just move on. And
Yeah,
if you look
okay.
at season, what is it, 3? Yeah, season 3 of Voyager, you have Future's End Part 1 and 2. Great episode. Great episode arc. Fantastic stuff. Then you have Warlord, which is not a good episode. It's not horrible. It's just not good. And then immediately after that, you have The Q and the Gray, which is a fantastically fun episode. And then right after that, you have Macrocosm, which is where you get Badass Janeway. And so out of that block of 5 episodes, mainly 4, like Warlord stands out because it's a Kess episode, which not everybody likes Kess, and it has a very mundane plot.
Okay, you're bringing up a lot of good things here. Let's talk about your lists, though. Yeah, Future's End 1 and 2, I think, are more or less considered high up there in terms of ranking, quality, fun, entertaining episodes of Voyager. Now, Warlord is kind of a mixed bag, right? Because not everybody likes Kess. The story is it's just okay. It's more of a showcase for Jennifer Lean to show that, hey, she can act. She's pretty good at it.
Yes, and that definitely showcases that. And for people who don't remember, Warlord is a Voyager episode where Kess is controlled by an alien warlord named Tyrion. So like his body dies, and then, for lack of a better word, Katra, goes into into somebody else, and it goes into Kess. And so Kess becomes this Tyrion, and she tries to perform a regime change. Like, she tries to be the leader of that world, or whatever
Yeah. Uh-huh.
region,
We know what you're talking about. Yeah.
whatever it was, something like that. And so it's Voyager's job to excise that consciousness out of Kess. And it's a simple enough plot. I mean, it's a sci-fi plot, but it's a great concept, but it's hard. It was hard to fill a full hour. And I think that's another thing that is a sign of mediocre episodes, is that you have a great story, a great idea, but it's really 22 minutes of content, and you stretch it over to 42, 45.
Yeah, that's another really good point. When you have to pad out an episode, it becomes pretty obvious, especially upon multiple viewings. You realize you could trim off so much fat. One thing I think does happen is a writer comes up with what they think is a really good idea. They put it on paper and say, this is an amazing concept. This is so good. And then they actually write it out, and it falls short. But because of time constraints and the nature of Hollywood and TV, they have to go through with it. The idea is there. They've got to just run with it. They've got to crank something out. So they go with it, and they do their very best to make it work. But along the way, a lot of things can happen. One of which is padding. Another, I think, is sometimes, especially if you're doing kind of like a writing team, sometimes writing by committee is not the best thing, where everybody's ideas converge into this weird mishmash of a story, and then suddenly everybody's vision is no vision, and it falls completely flat because nobody has any idea what the story's saying anymore.
Right. And that does make it difficult. I mean, there's huge benefits to having a writer's room, and because like when you work together on something, you can bounce ideas off of each other, you can have the whiteboard, and you can get that collective genius working together. And then there's other times when there's something different. Like, you can have a good positive writer's room where everybody's together with the same goal, trying to make it work, and you have the idea, and you're just like, okay, great. And then there's the other time where you write a script, you hand it off, and then it's rewritten by a producer, and then that producer, sends it to somebody to do punch up, and then that person sends it off to another writer, and then you're not even involved in the process anymore. And it
Right.
that's when it looks like a camel, as opposed to, it's the opposite of a group project. Like, a group project, you work together, and then the other time it's somebody doing your work for you, and you're not involved at all, and it's unrecognizable.
Yeah. That's a good distinction to make, too, is sometimes the writer's room or the writing team, if they're all focused, it can make beautiful things happen because no one mind is going to get it right every single time. So you have other people to kind of help rein things in and keep things in tip-top shape. Other times, things get totally lost.
Mm-hmm.
So there is
Absolutely.
that as well. So when it comes to these Just Okay episodes, I would love to know if any particular Trek episodes come to mind for you.
Well, I mean, it's hard because in and of itself, it's easy to forget mediocre episodes.
Sure, yeah.
Like you remember the bad ones and you remember the good ones. But when it comes to mediocre ones, you're just kind of like, oh, geez, what was that called? What was that about? There's so many times, like I've rewatched every Star Trek episode. I lost track, like over the years, that's what you do. You rewatch it constantly.
Yeah.
And so like, who knows if it's, 12 times to 20 times, whatever it is or more, even though I've done that many rewatches, there are so many times when I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this one.
Well, let's also take into account, not only have we been doing this over the last 20, 30, maybe more years, but there's how many hours of Star Trek available to us? And our memory can only handle so much.
I think it's like 750. I think that was without Discovery involved.
Yeah,
So like
now with Discovery and Picard on the way, we're going to be just hurtling our way to 1,000 hours easily.
Yeah, we're easily, like, and also with the lower decks being thrown in and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I think one thing that definitely pops into my brain, and this is one of those things that I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was an episode where Trip from Enterprise, where Trip crash lands on a planet with a spoiled princess.
Oh, yeah. I know the episode you're talking about. Okay, yeah. What is it called?
And
but
that's
I do remember this, yes.
And that's the plot. Like, that's pretty much the plot.
It is, and don't they have to be, I don't know, they have to get somewhere, or he has to get her somewhere?
Well, he didn't know that he was carrying her. Like, that's the thing, is that like she was in a cargo bay and he was hauling her like it was like she was just cargo. He didn't know that it was human cargo. And then they crash land and he opens it up and there's a beautiful woman inside. She's a horrible, horrible actress. And it was it just, and I think, like, because they're both attractive, they of course had to have them have sex and have some sort of romantic link, and they had no chemistry whatsoever. Actually, you know what? That's not even mediocre. That was just a bad episode.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do say that about this episode. But then some people just say, yeah, it's just okay. This is probably a very good example of an idea that just didn't quite live up to its potential. Maybe they could have had, I don't know, a little more of a different dynamic between these two characters. Maybe they could have cast a different actress, and maybe that we could have been a little more sold on it. But either way, it's a fairly classic thing, right? Just basically get the princess out of danger. I mean, that's the whole Mario Brothers game.
I think another one that pops in my head, and I feel like it's easy to pick on season 1 episodes of any Star Trek show, whether it's,
of course,
like whether it's TNG or Deep Space Nine or Voyager, Enterprise, even Discovery. But Babel of Deep Space Nine. It's in season 1. A mysterious virus plagues the station, causing speech distortions and eventually death. This one was one of those, again, where it's a great concept and really interesting. Like we saw a little bit of that in Discovery, but it was just a scene in Discovery.
Sure.
And just imagine that scene in Discovery stretched out to an entire episode, and then you have Babel in season 1 Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And it made a great, like I said, it made a great scene in Discovery and a very mediocre episode in Babel.
Again, one of those things where if you stretch it out far enough, it can't fly. Maybe it should have just been a scene. Discovery got that right.
And I think with Discovery, though, they added something even more to it to make it more interesting, where they were actually speaking language that other people didn't understand. They were also viewing like the written word in a different language, but it was actually language. And in Babel, they were just speaking nonsense.
It's true. So with that, okay, bunch of gibberish. That's entertaining for only so long.
Right, and it's like a word salad type deal. So I feel like even if Discovery was stretched out to an entire episode, that would make it more interesting because you're dealing with
Sure.
real language that you can decipher instead of just nonsense.
Yeah. When I think of Voyager episodes that are just okay, a lot of times I think they have the kernel of a really good idea, but they don't develop it deep enough. You know what I mean? And it kind of sounds like maybe you could do that with this idea. If you give it enough complication, if you give it enough depth, you could make a whole episode out of it if you wanted to.
Mhm.
But you have to have that amount of material to work with. Otherwise, it's just
There's also one thing that I think is interesting, that this is much more of a complication now, today, than it would have been in the 90s and the 80s, was there's certain times when you have more serialized Trek, like in Enterprise or Discovery, when you have a standalone episode that doesn't contribute to the overall arc or storyline, you're kind of like, oh my God, why is this wasting my time?
Why
Like,
are we
what
doing
is-
this? Yes.
Why are we doing this? What's going on?
There's times I felt that way with Orange is the New Black, the last season, as well as The Handmaid's Tale. Both very recent, so I'll try not to spoil anything, but there were times when I was going through these seasons, and just wondering, guys, what are you doing? Can we please move things along? And I know that I've said in criticism of Discovery, could we just breathe a little bit on that show, and can we process what's happening? Well, that almost feels contradictory to what I'm saying to these two shows, where I'm saying, can we move it along, please? I think balance is a very important thing, apparently.
Oh, no, I think that's, yeah, absolutely. Balance is a thing, because you can have a rushed episode, you can have a rushed season or a rushed episode that needs to slow down, take its time and explore these concepts, because like take Discovery, for example, which we've talked about before, is that these concepts are great concepts, and you have a
Yes.
storyline that's a really engaging and interesting storyline, and they're trying to pack in 3 years into one season.
Yes,
And-
that's what Discovery is doing, and that's why it's like so mind-numbing when they just keep going from plot point to plot point to plot point, where
Right.
maybe they do need to slow down a little bit, but then if you put the brakes on and you're going absolutely nowhere for a full hour or more, I mean, it's pretty obvious, okay, you guys are just dragging this out. You don't know what you're doing, do you?
And that's the thing, is that like we're not asking for Discovery to stop halting that stop the momentum, or say let's focus on something outside of the storyline. We're asking them to slow
No.
down. Now, because that's the thing, if they had like, just imagine in season 2 all this craziness is going on and they're trying to do the Red Angel storyline, and then they stop and they have like a Data's Day episode.
Yeah.
You'd be like,
as
what the hell is going on?
Exactly. As fascinating as that might be, it would not fit at all, especially with the format of Discovery. We would just be, what the F?
And that's not a chance to breathe. That's halting all momentum. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And the first thing that popped into my head was in Star Trek Enterprise Season 3, the hatchery episode.
Okay, now I do not remember this one. Can you refresh me?
Well, Season 3 is, this is a divisive season, but I love it. This was boom, serialized Star Trek, really for the first time for an entire season. I know, Deep Space Nine did it, overall. And those final 10 episodes in the last season, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that with Enterprise, it was boom. This is our mission statement for the season. First episode introduces it. The last episode closes it. That was it. We didn't really get that in Deep Space Nine, but there is some great serialized storytelling in Deep Space Nine. So that's the distinction that I'm making. Don't email me. With Hatchery, it's the 17th episode of the 3rd season, and so it's all about the Xindi. The Xindi are going to destroy Earth, and so it's Enterprise's mission to stop the Xindi from destroying Earth. And then there's this episode where Archer becomes obsessed with how do I phrase this? He's trying to save this hatchery. He's trying to save these eggs, and he becomes obsessed with these insectoid eggs, and he's clearly insane. He's clearly a crazy person. And And so Trip has to lead a mutiny to relieve Archer of his command, and it takes them way too long to figure out that he's crazy. And Scott Bakula is not a subtle actor, and so like he really ramps up and dials up the crazy. And so when you're watching this, you're just like, okay, he's clearly insane. You guys need to do something about it. You're taking way too long to do something about it. And also, what the hell is this about? Why aren't we going and trying to save the day? Like, people are going to die.
Okay, is it sad that I don't remember a thing about this episode at all?
No, that's what I'm talking about. This is a very mediocre episode. It halts the momentum of season 3, which a few episodes really did in season 3. But with mediocre episodes and episodes that are just okay, you don't devote them to memory because they're not worth devoting to memory.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those that just, I think the moment I watched it, or when I was done watching it, it just brain bleached. Okay, that was completely not worth 45 minutes. Nothing important happened. Moving on.
Right. And I think the one that, there's one Voyager one that pops into my brain.
Which one's that?
It's always been an inside joke between the two of us because, you know, we had a show where we hosted, 190 episodes all about Voyager, and we often came back to this one. It's called Unforgettable. And it's
yes.
It's
Wrong
one of
title.
it's one of the most forgettable Star Trek episodes of all time. It's a Chakotay episode. Not a lot of people love Chakotay. I do. But it's and Wikipedia describes it as this: an alien female from a cloaked ship asks for Chakotay by name and requests asylum on Voyager from her people. And the whole story is that, like she's defecting, and they have technology that erases your memory so that you don't know about them. And then, the guest star is Virginia Madsen, who's a really great actress and really fun. And she falls in love with Chakotay, doesn't want him to forget her. She doesn't want to forget him. But then, of course, that's what happens. And it's just, again, on paper, it should be an interesting episode, but it really focused heavily on the romance and not so much on the sci-fi. And it was even directed by Andrew Robinson, the guy who played Garrick.
Yep.
And so it's not a poorly directed episode, but it's just like, there was nothing there to really make it rise above.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think worked against this episode was, one, it does focus on Chakotay. And not a lot of people are big fans of Chakotay, because this was what, season 3 or 4?
4. End of season, like near the end of season 4.
Okay, I think at this point, a lot of people had already given up on Chakotay. He was just going nowhere. So they tried to throw him a bone, right? With this kind of an episode, really hyped it up. Got a good actress, got a good director, had a good concept. But you know what? With romance on Star Trek, and especially with a guest star, we know it's not gonna go anywhere. So that's another strike.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, that's a good point.
So, I mean, with that, we know that at the end of this episode, they're gonna part ways. They'll remember each other fondly forever, right? And then next week, it's like it never happened. So,
and then he's on to the next person.
Right. And especially for Chakotay, who did get a romance here and there, but we all knew it was crap and it was stupid and it just wasn't going to work out. So, I mean, and I remember they tried really hard to hype this whole thing too. And it fell so short.
And here's the thing. Like, the episode before it was the Omega Directive, which was fantastic drama, a great Janeway 7 episode. And then the next one was Living Witness.
Ooh, yeah, okay, so those are 2 fairly high-concept episodes. Really good acting, very interesting, intriguing sci-fi story ideas. And then we've got this in the middle. And so, again, it's like you were saying earlier, where if an okay episode is sandwiched between really good episodes, it kind of takes it down a notch. Now, if this episode had aired, say, after something like Threshold or Favorite Son or something, we might have a higher opinion of it, but we don't.
Right. And the same kind of thing even, happens with TNG, where, like, if you look at, oh God, what's the season number? Season 6, which has some really great episodes in it. You have Chain of Command, part 1 and 2. Fantastic stuff. Some of the best acting out of Patrick Stewart that we've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have Ship in a Bottle. That's a Moriarty episode. And then you have Aquiel, which some people probably don't even remember what it is. Like, the crew of the Enterprise investigates a mysterious death on a remote station, and Commander LaForge falls for the main suspect. And then right after that, you have Face of the Enemy, and then
Yeah.
Tapestry. And so these are all great episodes except for Aquiel. And so
Yeah.
with Aquiel, you have, I mean, again, I feel like LaForge's episodes just weren't that good.
They didn't give him the best stuff to work with, and especially if we're talking a Geordie romance, that's a bad idea. I mean, we had the whole Leah Brahms thing. Anytime they try to go here, it just I think it lowers our opinion of Geordie a little bit, at least in the romance department. Plus, then you've got all these other heavy hitters. These episodes that we really are critically acclaimed and fan favorites. Tapestry, Face of the Enemy, they're right at the top. I think Aquiel, that one is either just okay and forgettable by a lot of people, but then you've got people who say that's one of the worst episodes of Star Trek I've ever seen.
That's
So
true.
then you're going into infamous territory.
This might be burgeoning on bad, not just mediocre, because
Yeah.
there's so many scenes of him just sitting in his chair, listening to her speak, like listening to a recording of her speak. And we're just like, oh, great, this is so entertaining. I love watching Geordie just sit down and listen to someone speak. And it's weird because it's directed by Cliff Bowl, the story's by Jerry Taylor, and it was written by Braga and Moore.
Right. All good. I mean, they've produced solid work. We know that they can do their job. But
I know
guess,
that there is some hesitation behind Braga, but come on, it's Ronald D. Moore and Jerry Taylor and Cliff Bowl.
Just don't let Braga write about science. He doesn't understand. But, I mean, I guess the point of this is they can't all be winners, I guess, right?
Right.
And nobody
Absolutely.
sets out to make a bad one, but just things do end up kind of unfolding. The TNG episode, when I thought about this topic that stood out to me, was an episode called Imaginary Friend. Do you remember this?
Imaginary. Oh, wait. Was that the one where the little blonde girl was the imaginary one? And she was that actress who was really hot at the time. Like she was the child actress, like who just kind of went from show to show to show. Like she was a really evil looking blonde girl.
She was blonde. I don't know if she was having like a massive career awakening or not. But yeah, there was definitely a blonde girl. It was two girls. It was a girl who she had lost her mother and she was with her dad who was being assigned from ship to ship and whatnot. She'd come aboard the Enterprise, was talking to Counselor Troy and whatnot, and she has this imaginary friend. Well, the imaginary friend comes to life. It's really an alien life form, blah, blah, blah. Causes a lot of trouble. And I think the whole point of the episode, at the heart of it, is kids, you ought to listen to your parents because we set rules for a reason. Now, you can't completely argue against the moral of a story. Like, yes, parents are supposed to provide structure for their kids and safety and a sense of security and whatnot. Kids need these things. And kids, you should listen to your parents if they've got your best interests at heart because that's their job. They're trying to protect you from yourself because you just don't know better yet. But as a story, I mean, I loved this episode, amazingly enough, when I was a kid. Despite the lesson, you'd think I'd hate it, but I just thought, there's kids. They're actually doing a kid's story on the Enterprise, which actually, that's kind of a strike against, right? Is anytime they have child actors, it just typically doesn't go that well. I know that they tried, but it wasn't always their best work. And this was one of the more interesting kid ones, just because it was an Alexander, basically, which I think was the appeal. But now I look at that episode and I realize, oh, wow, no, you just tried to put a sci-fi twist on it and make it work, and it really fell flat.
Yeah, I feel like Star Trek doesn't really do kid stories that well. I mean, they got a little bit of it right with Naomi Wildman and Voyager, but it took them that long to get there.
I was just going to say, Naomi was one of the few exceptions.
I looked up the actress's name, and her name is Shay Astar, or Astar, I don't know how you pronounce it. And yeah, like in the early 90s, she was on Quantum Leap, she was on Boy Meets World, she was on ER, she was on The Good Life, and she had a recurring role on Third Rock from the Sun. And like the 90s were like, especially the early 90s, like that was her time. Like she was everywhere.
Okay, she really was, and she was on some very, very high quality shows back then. So good for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what
and
happened?
That's
Like,
really
did she
all that I
fizzle
remember.
out? She no longer acting?
No, I think she actually is still acting. I mean, like I'm on Memory Alpha right now, so it's not the most up to date.
Okay.
But she was in The Unit She was in a short-lived Fox series called The Inside. She was on Cold Case. Let's see, like she was in a Showtime series called Shameless. Oh, that's still going on. So yeah, she looks like she's still going.
Okay, still well, good for her. Good for her.
Good
That's
for her.
Cool. Yeah. All right, so one other Voyager episode that I think is just okay, but I secretly kind of like parts of it, is the second season episode Parturition. Now, it's the spaghetti fight episode. Does that ring any bells?
Oh yeah, I like this one. I like this one a lot.
Now, this episode certainly has its flaws. But if you tell me on paper it's going to be Neelix and Tom Paris having to work together, especially after some tensions where they resolve the freaking love triangle that they decided to build between these three with Kes, and they're actually going to bury the hatchet, I'm going to say, yes, do this episode. Now, the spaghetti fight, probably the best thing about the whole episode. Really good stuff. And especially Janeway smacking the axe on the two of them and making them fight it out. But then the whole dinosaur plot, where they have basically the leftover props from the show Dinosaurs. I don't know if you watched that show, but it's very reminiscent. It looks like a puppet. The little thing after it hatches. I was just waiting for it to say, not the mama, because that was the thing from the show Dinosaurs. They have to take care of this thing. They learn to nurture it, and they decide, yeah, you know what? We're all right. Okay, cool. The execution was not the greatest. And that was not to any fault of Robert Duncan McNeil or Ethan Phillips or even necessarily the writers. It just, I don't know, especially after the spaghetti fight, it kind of lacks excitement because it's so stereotypical. Oh, they're going to come together for the cause of finding this little hatchling and returning it to its mother.
I liked it. I can't really agree with you on this one.
I mean, I kind of feel like it's learning curve, right? Where we're going to put these misfits together and they're going to come out the other side as a team and a unified force, and they're going to come onto the good side.
Again, I didn't think learning curve was that bad. Like, yeah, I thought it was okay. But maybe even like verging on more than just okay. I don't know.
All right.
So
I mean, again,
can't...
it kind of goes back to those things where some of these mediocre episodes are better received to some than they are to others, depending on what we like and what we're looking for in each series or episode.
All right.
That's all you got to say? That's fair.
That's all I got to say.
You know, when we're talking just okay, I mean, sometimes that is all you have to say. It's just, yeah, that happened. All right.
Well,
so,
actually,
any final thoughts?
One thing I'd love to hear from our audience is, with this in mind, like, what is an episode? Because our audience could just go on and on with an episode list of what's just okay.
Sure.
What's an episode that you've heard other people really like that you think is just okay? Or even vice versa. You know, like, what's an episode that you think is great that a lot of people think is just like, eh? You know,
yeah.
I'd love to hear the disparity between the two. Like, what have you come across? Because all of us can list mediocre episodes, but I want to know from our listeners, what's something that you think is mediocre that a lot of people think is great, or vice versa. You can go to thenerdparty.com/contact, select Punch It from the drop-down menu, fill out the form. It'll send us an email, and we will, if we don't reply back, we read everything. We can't always reply to everything, but we try that. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. The show Twitter is Join Nerd Party. You can find me personally on Twitter at The Insane Robin.
And you can find me at Oh the Profanity. And don't forget to tell us why these episodes are either something that you like or something that is just eh. Because that's the important thing that makes it interesting. Also, maybe if we get enough replies, we'll read them on the show, just like we did this week with last week's topic.
And thank you to those who have already written in and are planning on writing in. So next week, we don't know what is going to happen. We don't know if it's going to, hopefully it'll be better than mediocre or just okay. I think it will be. But whatever it's going to be, we're going to punch it.
Ready for warp, sir. Let's punch it.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.